crazy morning. The internet just went out. I was downstairs rebooting. If you saw the number of steps I had to run up to get here, I'm surprised I'm breathing at all at this moment. But welcome to our live event. My silent co host, Misha Elliott, may not be so silent today. So I'm excited to have her be in the space. And while everyone is gathering, I wanted to share some information for those listening to the replay. If you're new to the sexuality space, we're live every Wednesday, noon Eastern Time on Twitter. I have worked to create a sex positive community where we can talk about all sorts of sex topics. We've been interviewing CEOs from sex companies, sex educators, writers. We've done a lot of different things in here, and I've mainly wanted to integrate my sexuality work into everyday life, which is seen right this minute in the daylight. Here we are doing our work. So, welcome to everyone. I see lots of regulars have arrived. Hello. Today, I'm going to, I want to mention 2 weeks ago, we spoke with Rocio Palayo of the Reimagine Sexuality Conference, which actually starts on Friday. No, Thursday. Whatever day, the second, whatever day the second is. And so if you haven't gotten your ticket, there's a link on one of my tweets. I'm sure Misha can find it, where you can get your free ticket for the first 4 days of the conference. And after that, it's by payment. So I'm really excited, and you won't believe the lineup of speakers that they have. It's pretty cool in the sex tech world. Last week, we had a huge electricity storm and knocked our electricity out in the house, which is why we didn't do this space last week. So we're picking up where we left off, and our topic is going to be elements of writing sex in scenes. So I'll talk a little bit with Mish, and then we'll open it up. Mish, you're in co-host spot. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear
I
me?
can. Are we going to hear from Dwight and the girls?
Awesome. Dwight is reconfined. Decided to stage an escape this morning, and since I don't handle my daughter and son-in-law's bearded dragon very often, we had a chat, and I bribed him with an extra mealworm to go back into his little sanctuary.
Well, I hate that you
And the
had.
girls are laying here on the floor. I'm surprised they're not outside. I left the door open for them so they could come and go as they please. I am in what is lovingly known as the Black Lab Club.
Well, there you go. And you're at your favorite Airbnb this week, having a grand old time with these animals. So I think that's pretty darn cool. And I guess you saw my tweet this morning, and I can share with everyone that this morning with my coffee, I signed a contract for my story, Charlotte the Pirate Queen, that will be coming
Yes.
out in summer of 2023 with a book title called It Takes Two by Cleus Press, edited by Rachel Kramer Bussell. So I'm really excited about that. Maggie, I see you getting excited down there. And the project of the Pirate Queen, Charlotte, is continued. She's outlined and ready to go, and all the other places that she's going to end up in ports of call up and down the Atlantic coast. So that ought to be pretty interesting. So you can imagine my energy is pretty high this morning, and it's doubly high because yesterday I received edits on the whole point of this conversation, Scenes with Sex. I received my edits back from the editor, and I love collaborative work, and I think, to be in that space where you know how difficult it is in your own mind. Oh, I'm putting this out to the world. How's it going to be accepted? What are people going to think? As a brand new way to look at things. So I had sexuality people looking at the sexuality part, but this editor, while sex positive and wonderful, Sexuality is not the expertise. And let me tell you, what she provided to me was, here are all of the worksheets that you're going to create that go with this book now. So Misha and I had a Zoom this morning, and I'm going through the list going, look at this. She mocked up 4, and she said, and I want you to do it like this so people can see this and then they can have that. And I was laughing so hard going, this is really what it's about. And, it's across the board, the elements of writing about sexuality in fiction is no different than our regular life. We haven't necessarily had any specific training about what that has to do with. And I'm really excited to have taken all the work that I've done previously, putting it into all the work that I'm doing currently to create this new thing that's going to be coming out, hopefully in November. We'll keep that in mind in that direction. But Mish, I'm interested. You and Maggie have spent a lot of time with this manuscript, and I'm curious, when you look at the whole thing, what do you think is going to be the most helpful part for people in looking at scenes with sex?
I think just being able to work through it and being able to find and work with their own personal issues and not put those on their characters. Like they're going to be able to see kind of like how they say in the kink community, not yucking someone else's yum. They might not like a certain act or scene type in sexual play, but their character might. And if they do the proper research and they do the proper work with the book, they're going to be able to write it out, and the people reading it who enjoy that sort of scene will hopefully feel it, that they actually took the time to do the work and the emotional work, and they'll feel the positive and the fun and the love that went into that scene.
I love it. And you're also hitting on the point that was important to me, is that a book like this isn't just for a scene. This is for a story. And so anyone who's writing can start taking a look at their characters from a more holistic point, where they actually add sexuality as a component of information that they could use as detail for us to better understand who the characters are and why they make some of the decisions that they do and that sort of thing. And I don't think people have really tapped into that as a way to, in just a general story. I mean, you and I have talked all the time about, we walk around with our sexuality, we carry our sexuality. Why aren't we writing stories that integrate that part, an element, even if the subplot isn't directly related to sexuality? We can still talk about the sexuality of the character in their descriptors or in their likes or in their wants. And that's a lot of neat detail that you can put in that direction. And I know that one of the things that surprised me when I got the edits back from the editor, she said, I absolutely loved the formula that you came up with. And Misha and I talked about that forever. Misha's like, I don't know about this formula. She said, I love the formula. Now, what I want you to do with the formula is to lay out this, and this. And I was like, this is so fun to see how someone took the material and utilized it from the publishing direction to say, I could see how authors would be able to use this particular piece of information. And so, Misha and I can run the whole show here, but that's not what this is about. I'm really interested in what questions you might have, wondering what this has to do with or anything like that. So feel free to request the mic and we'll just get a general conversation going. I have the entire, what is it, almost 200-page manuscript sitting here with all of these lovely worksheets right beside me, where my energy is just high as a kite. So it's pretty exciting to see this. Hi, Stuart. Welcome. Join
Hi,
in.
Dr. J. Hi, Misha. No, it's difficult to join in because it's just been interesting to listen to you talking about the process, and it's been interesting to hear the process of you writing this book over the past few months, and the level of excitement in your voice is palpable, and it's just terrific.
Wow, that blows me away because sometimes I think, am I the only one who has this feeling about this particular book? And I am going to share one other tidbit. You know, while people know that I started my fiction writing in the erotica world, I'm also writing erotic romance. And the coolest thing occurred. There's going to be a book that's coming out on Valentine's Day by Rachel Kramer Bussell on how to write erotica. And I am one of the people that she interviewed for that book. So I'm really excited to think, 2023 is going to be the year of the education and the content and the different things that, is a different flavor that I bring forward and a different lens that I use to look at the writing and, make the particular connections. And Stuart, is there any one item that jumps out at you more than another that you've heard me get really excited about?
Um, no, I'm going to be interested to, having had your input on a story with erotic content, then it's going to be interesting to be able to have your whole book as a reference work. So that, yeah, it's going to be useful.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Alex, welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
How so glad to hear about all these books. What are coming out next year? They're going to be well interesting.
Definitely. Been busy, been busy.
How's that way? What is there audiobooks? That's my main concern. Is there going to be an audiobook version?
Well, all of Cleus Press's books definitely have audiobooks that go with them. I'm gonna go ahead and pause and tell you a piece of information that I was going to save for the end of the space, but I'll tell it now because it'll help answer that question. I will be off the grid for the month of September. I will be where internet is not, and I will be deep in the woods and deep on top of a mountain. And in that process, there is a audio narrator that I will be talking with, to see if she would be willing to narrate this particular nonfiction, How to Write Scenes with Sex book for us to have in audio. How does that sound, Alex?
That sounds very good. That sounds great. I can't wait to hear what that sounds like. It will be an amazing book.
Well, if you heard her voice, wow, she's pretty awesome. If I had my druthers, it'd have to be Rose Caraway, but this person that I met, I think they would just be really spectacular in doing this. So that's going to be one of the things that's going to be on the out in the woods, make contact, that sort of thing. She happens to be up where I'm going, so it's going to be set up a time and go have lunch and figure that out. So I'm really excited.
Fantastic.
So what are you interested in about a book like this, Alex?
Well, just learning more, sort of, as you know, I write erotica and I write stuff for Medium like that. It's just learning more sort of tricks and sort of ways of getting more in depth with characters, probably, and I always start with either sort of a part of the character, like you were saying. I always start with like maybe a disability or a specialist sort of subject or word. That's how I normally work, because being friends with Posey Churchgate, he normally sort of sends me free sort of ideas and we go from there, basically. So it's sort of, I'm looking always for more ways of learning stuff, basically.
So Alex, did you say, I see Misha put up in the nest the second dot up there is a sex and disability story that I wrote. And what was really cool about that particular story, it's about gay men. And one of my friends that did work with me in North Carolina, he was very instrumental in being my best cheerleader when I started this. And I was like, I don't know, do you think I can do this writing stuff? And he said, let me tell you, you're one of those people that whatever you set your mind to, you do. I have no qualms whatsoever that you'll do this and you'll do it spectacularly. And he said, and I expect you to write something for me. And I was like, You do? And so we went through discussing what would be interesting, what would be a particular direction that I could take a story. And that particular story that's up there is one that he read before it went live. And said he couldn't be prouder of how I put it together. So I'm really excited to be able to share that. Ooh, I hear the doggies at the Airbnb.
They are.
Sorry about that. Alex, I just wanted to let you know I sent the tweet to you in a DM.
I just saw that. I just saw that, Misha, because my phone is talking to me. Why? So I'm like doing a double phone thing, hearing tweets pop in and also listening to Dr. J.
Well, I'll very much be interested in what you think about that particular story.
I will definitely have a look at that and let you know on that. Definitely. Sounds fun.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I see Poppy has joined us on stage too. Hello, Poppy. I have to tell everybody I got to spend a great amount of time one-on-one with Poppy for a delightful conversation. Y'all should all do that.
Oh, Dr. J, I'm starting the edits now, and I'm so glad you said that you identify as an erotic romance writer, because that was how I planned on introducing you, and I couldn't be prouder to do that. And so that's kind of my question to you is, being a romance podcaster and liking things on the spicier side, I think I'm sure you have encountered people who are put off by sex scenes and romances, and then there are people who seek them out. They actually search for certain keywords to make sure they're in the romance before they go ahead and buy or read the book. So I'm just wondering if you can talk about, in terms of how you like to bring things into the daylight, how difficult is it to find a publisher for work like this? And did you struggle at all with finding the right home for your erotic romance or erotica?
Well, Poppy, what a delightful way to think about this. It's interesting. I think I got in this in such a backwards direction because I started with the erotica first, but there are many stories that I wrote that had romantic elements. And so it was just a natural progression to flip the plots to go into the happily ever after or the happy for now, and to think about that the vehicle was how detailed I wanted the sexual journey to be, how close up and personal in that direction, and the growth that was going to go on between the characters in that way. So to answer that specifically, did I have any problems locating a publisher? I am the owner of PassionWorks Press, LLC. So I'm the one who's going to be publishing the first book in a series called Jolted. And it's an erotic romance set in a sex education facility. And the heroine is a sex educator who has just finished school, and she is petrified to start her new job, and more petrified because she has to go back to the South where she has some very bittersweet memories. And she's into, I'm going to do this myself, I'm going to do this myself, but she has to work with the CEO of a pharmaceutical company in the process to do this. And so it launches a interesting and detailed story of these characters, the characters' friendships, and then where the series is going to go. So I have 3 books outlined with a 0.5 book in between where there's a really cool and interesting side direction. So to take this in a different direction than what you specifically asked, Misha and I spend a lot of time doing mapping. I have this giant piece of paper, and every story that I've written, I think about the worlds that I've created and how can I link from this story series into that story series. And so to talk about Charlotte today, you may not have been here when I said I signed a contract with Cleus Press this morning. Charlotte the Pirate Queen, while it's a sexy stranger's story, Charlotte just can't stay away. And so there's an entire series about where Charlotte's going to go up and down the East Coast, and she's going to be dipping into different story worlds of different stories that I've already created. And so it's something that I've actively and detailed really work in this process. So we'll see how that goes. Chicken Little, do it yourself.
I would like to blame Dr. J for me waking up at 3 a.m. and realizing how the 3 trilogies I've been daydreaming about for the past year and a half all connect. And I have read her first book, Jolted. And if anybody wants spoilers, the higher you bribe me, the more you might get.
Oh, now wait a minute. You can't tell everything. My other favorite editor, who is my sister in Smut, Oleander Plume, she would always tell people, if you want to read a story that always has a twist in the tail, you need to read Dr. J. And I have laughed so hard going, I'm a twist in the tail, right?
Yes,
If that,
yes,
if,
you are.
if that doesn't sound like something that fits in the sexuality world, I don't know what does. Poppy, did that give you what you needed? You have other questions?
Yes, I have some follow-up questions naturally.
Please.
Okay, so after our delightful conversation for my podcast, I started thinking about, do you remember that old Hollywood saying, like, if you want to send a message, use Western Union? But I wonder about, with your background, making the transition to fiction from your clinical experiences and your teaching experiences in the sexuality world. Do you ever get caught up in wanting to model healthy sexual behavior and then pull yourself back thinking, oh, I wonder if this will be fictionally, if this will be interesting enough? Or how do you handle dysfunction, functional, healthy sexuality in an erotic romance? Like, how do you approach that?
I love that question. And boy, does that drive home the book that I have now currently written in the Scenes with Sex, because I have people work with in the character Bible, which most people know, what that is and what are the components that you're going to talk about: character name, physical description, motivation, goals, strength, weakness, hobby, gestures. Most people don't list sexual history. So one of the things that I have done is to go through and list lots of interesting questions to help people get a notion of how sexuality unfolded for that particular character. And that could be normative things, that could be unusual, accidental things, it could be the whole mix. But in that process, you're taking the holistic character and the story that you're creating for whatever their transformation, their goal that they're trying to do, the plot of this particular story. And you tie the sexuality to that. And so if I'm working specifically with the character and what they're doing, then I'm not sitting in me, Dr. J space. I'm sitting in the lap of the character going, okay, now what do? You have this and this and this going on, and this is your history. And, how are you going to move this forward? And I think sometimes it's a matter of how much movement do people make in growth, and how are you going to make that happen in your particular story in the amount that you do? And you just reminded me too, you were talking about the names of things. I was talking to an editor where, everything is constructed in writing, file folders, it's a genre, it's this genre, it has this, it has that. And so we look at the difference between someone saying, I want to read that book that's spicy. So, what is that going to be called? What are the steamy romance? Where are we going to go with the descriptors so people know what they're getting? And I've always been put off when it talked about a clean romance, because if we look at clean and dirty, it's like, wait a minute, where is this coming from? And we had a discussion that maybe there's actually some movement that is occurring with that particular word, clean, that now people are using the word sweet. And so it's kind of you're looking at the continuum of what's out there now. And I always push the envelope. Can I create a new thing that's called this? And, how can we address it? And,
I just had an idea about that I can recommend. You've got your sweet and your spicy. So I say we either write savory or tangy. And for those asking about how to integrate learning into a story or education into a story, I highly recommend Dr. J's story, Infused Leather. Which Best Women's was that in? Was that 3?
Yeah, it was volume 3. Yeah. And
Best Women's Erotica of the Year, volume 3. if you can get the audiobook, the way that Rose Caraway reads it is gold. I mean, diamond, platinum. It's like the best thing, one of the best stories I've ever heard her read. She really does a good job.
Oh, wow. Yay, Rose. Yay, me. I can't believe you said that. That is so cool. And I'm not hitting my button to see what everybody's saying. So my co-host is right on the money doing her stuff. When you think about the education, that may be part of what you put in your story. Maybe that's an actual theme of what somebody wants to learn. And when I wrote that story came fully formed. I was in the Atlanta airport. I looked to my right and saw the coffee shop. I looked to my left and I saw the shoe stand for cleaning shoes. And this story like smashed from both sides into my head. And it's a redemptive story about how leather was used against people and how leather was reclaimed in order to have sex the way they wanted it. And it's interesting because one of the things that I talk about in the book is I had gotten accolades from Publishers Weekly and Library Journal for the story specifically because it did the education component. It showed this change in these people, and I submitted it to a competition. And in the book, I talk about how a judge said, I can't believe anybody would have read 2 pages of this book. They have no connection to this story. This makes no sense whatsoever. And I shared that, the editor who did the book and got me the edits yesterday, you should see what she wrote on the side of the page for that sentence. It blew me away. And really talking about the point of our individual selves being infused, being integrated, being wired into the way we present information or the way that we put it into our characters when it's really not the character, it's really a part of ourselves. So that made it really interesting. But Misha, thank you so much for saying that about the story. That's really cool. Poppy, more follow-ups?
Oh gosh, yes. Okay, so my little soapbox is people finding love, sex, and romance at an older age. And I guess we could say over 40, 45. I think we talked about this in the
Yeah.
podcast interview. And I haven't had the pleasure yet. Now I'm like so eager to read your stories. But I'm wondering if you tend to focus on older characters and maybe even characters who have, like Alex brings up so wonderfully every time, let's think about people who need accessibility. Like, do
Yeah.
you ever focus on characters? And I know sometimes that's a hard sell if you're not self-publishing, but I just wonder, Dr. J, what your feeling is about characters like that in erotic romance.
I believe everybody deserves pleasure across the board. And sometimes you personally ask the question, am I writing to market? Am I writing because this is what I believe should be out there and what I feel strongly about, the way Stuart's saying, the passions in my voice, and I'm bringing that forward in that direction. I think when I started the erotica writing, I was writing really across the continuum, lots of different topics, events, activities, people. And I think for me, I'm working on finding a sweet spot that, and this is going to be education for Donna, Dr. J. We have talked, and I've said this before, you all know I am 66 years old, and I am 16 years past menopause. And so part of the writing process for me on the very front end of the writing was a way to charge up what I talk about in the book, the quantum model. We deal with psychological and we deal with physical, and we each need different amounts of each in order to reach the reflex of arousal in our body and then the reflex of orgasm in our body. And as we get older, for myself, I've determined I've needed more of everything. And so some of the writing is easier to get more if I wrote younger characters than if I wrote older characters. That's me specifically. I think there would be a way that I could because of how I get story ideas, if I were to see a couple and I watched an interaction, which I'm thinking now as I said that I was sitting by a campfire, and this was a couple that you're talking about in the age range. Um, and they didn't think that I saw anything in the process, but the woman was sitting next to me and her partner stepped over in front of her and she took her foot and she started sliding her foot up under his shorts. And I'm watching this little dance, between the two of them. And this is the older couple in that process. And so I'm a person as a writer, give me an idea that I can see, that I can smell, that I can taste, and then blow life into it from there. Sometimes, especially with the pandemic, I'm in my office. It's not like I'm out and about. I'm not having the experiences like when I was in Paris. And boy, I wrote down, I don't know how many ideas for stories in that direction. So it's been kind of limiting thinking about that as part of the process. But I have so many stories, Poppy. It's like, which one has the most energy for me that I want to bring forward and get out to the world. And I do think about all those things, and they happen when they happen.
No shade at all, because that's, I think, that intuitive way of going about your art brings about the best art. So of course you do that. And very naturally, if you do feature older characters, you do have to include baggage and other challenges that sometimes just doesn't feel as fun. It might be more realistic, but it's not always what you feel like encountering as a writer or a reader. So I totally support you writing any age and any kind of configuration, that turns you on. Because if you're not turned on, then we won't be, right, Dr. J?
Well, that's a great point, because I don't know that you necessarily have to be turned on to write, especially if I'm looking at the way that I've put all of this content together about microtension and about the way that we know the brain works in storytelling and where you put anticipation and where the sex fits in the process, that you can create it. But it doesn't have to be the driver that you're being hot the whole time you're writing. It's an after the fact. I look at it after the fact and go, whoa, did I write that? But it wasn't because I was honed in or thinking energetically sexually at the moment that I was writing it. I have. And I can tell you, Tabitha Rain would tell you that she'd laugh hysterically. I say, wait, I got to get Ruby Glow and sit Ruby Glow in my chair because I need Ruby Glow to help me move forward in writing the rest of this story. So yeah, it just depends. It just depends on where you are. How's that?
I love it. You are such a star. I mean, just being able to break this down, because I think a lot of people would write this type of stuff, obviously based on their own sexual histories, things they've read and watched in culture. And I guess everybody approaches it differently. I've seen erotica Twitter talk about getting super turned on while writing these scenes. But I also love that what you bring to it is like a combo of like an intellectual knowledge, but also a feeling about how open and accessible and normalizing you want to make these things. And I just love that.
Oh, Poppy, that is so kind of you. Thank you. And I see that, Peach is up. Hello, my friend. You have to unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
That sounds very good. Oh, no, I'm listening and nodding, and people walking past me probably think I'm crazy, but everything you're saying, I'm in total agreement with. The thing that I was going to put into the discussion was really not a question. It was just more of an agreement, because I do find when I write things that are very close to home, the character is so much more real for me, and my readers remark that the character is so much more real for them too. And so I do think that tools to help people think of a backstory before they even begin writing their character is really necessary. I actually wrote a post recently suggesting that people do use Pinterest and make themselves a little mood board and think about what their character looks like. You know, they might be thinking, oh, he looks like Johnny Depp, but I want him to have blue eyes. So, you know, you sort of put all that together. And you might think what car he drives. You might think what music he listens to. I was suggesting that people make themselves little playlists that will evoke the mood of what they're writing. I really, really think that feeling that character as a real person is very important to writing it in a way that is tangible for the reader. The reader. And I also think that then you can do that thing that you just spoke about where they said, oh, but aren't you talking from Dr. J's point of view? And you said, no, I'm sitting in the character's lap.
I love it. And, you know, I was thinking that when all of the parts come together where you're thinking about your character and you're thinking about who they are, and that when I start talking to them is when I die laughing. It's like, oh, is that what you think? I don't know. And it'll be not writing the story. I'll be walking around the house and I'll be having a conversation as if they are a real person. Right, Niche? I talk to all sorts of different people at different times. It makes it kind of interesting. But you know what I think is interesting when I look at how I've put this book together is that a lot of times you said backstory, and I think that is so, so important. And maybe it's the teacher part in me, maybe it is the therapist part in me. I was given, you know, I'm in Rule 34, edited by Zach Jane Keir. The story is called Spoon Man, and I never intended that I would write a story like this. And I was out with some friends at dinner, and they said, oh, you know, they're not writers. They don't have any idea, and they, you know, can make jokes about what it is that I do. And somebody said, yeah, right. I bet you couldn't make a story if I told you you had to write a story about this. And you know me, I'm in that dare you proposition. Can you mute this for a second, Peach?
Oh, sure, sorry.
Got a lot of wind going on in there. And so we're sitting at a table and they picked up a spoon and said, I want you to write an erotic story about a spoon. I thought, well, they dared you and you took it up, and now you got to figure out how to do that. And boy, was that an interesting route to go into what the backstory would be for a spoon being a fetish item as part of a person's personality. And it was probably one of the most fun things that I had done to really, and this was the therapy and education direction, understanding why when things get wired into us at a young age. And in this particular story, this was a hyper kid as a kid who played the spoons. His mom saw somebody on TV doing that, and she thought, let me just get him spoons. We can sit here and he can do this. And one day, as adolescents tend to do, he found a porn movie, and he saw this beautiful woman with a spoon stirring her tea. And he, in that moment, identified the spoon work that he'd been doing all of these years into a sexual window. And from that moment forward, spoons were everything about sexuality. And I described his whole house where he had spoons here and he had to see a spoon in order to be sexual. And it was a fascinating way to put something together.
Absolutely. I can well imagine. I mean, I think Bridgerton has probably put a new meaning onto spoons just recently.
I haven't seen it, so I'll have to go look.
Oh, you have to look at the first series. It's to do with the Duke, and he's always sort of the way he sucks the spoon. It has had a lot of women in a dither.
Yeah, it's
I
interesting.
don't remember that scene.
Who was
You
that?
don't?
Me.
How come you don't remember that scene?
Probably because it was a while back, a few months ago.
Yeah, yeah. How fun.
I
Well,
think it's a gift now.
oh, okay. Well, I have to look it up for the gift then. Maggie,
Yeah,
I
that'd
wanted
save
to
you a lot of
see.
time.
That's right. Then I'll just go, whoo, there you go. Maggie, are you in a place where you can talk? Can you give me a heart if you can? I would be curious to have you come up for a
I did
minute.
send her an invite
Okay.
because
She's probably,
I was going to ask her about ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, because my daughter recently started reading that series, and she was reading reviews about how people are complaining about the spiciness of the books, and I'm like, I said, I know Maggie's reading this, and just for a funny, real quick, my daughter's youngest dog is also named Maggie. So anytime I talk about our Maggie, I have to say our Maggie. Anytime I talk about her Maggie, I have to say your Maggie.
that's funny. Got to keep everybody
But
straight.
and she's like, I think a lot of these readers were reading, they only read young adult and they're not used to having scenes with sex. And they started reading this, and she's like, there's only one really detailed scene in this one book. I can't understand why they're complaining that it's so spicy and hot that they can't take it, that it's too much. And she's like, the only thing I can think of is that they're coming straight from reading young adult with absolutely no detailed steamy scenes and reading this thinking, how do people read this in public?
That's interesting. That's interesting. Well, I see we magically got Maggie up on stage.
You
Hello,
did.
my
I'm
friend.
in a grocery store, so I'm gonna try to hide somewhere, but I don't think it's gonna be possible. I'll just.
Oh, wow.
It's New
You're
York
having
City.
to
It's
talk
fine.
about sex in public in New York
It's New York
City.
City. I have always had an issue with the young adult that term because I don't know what that means, to be honest. Because as a young adult, I read everything from romance with nothing that was related to sex except what's it called, implied, right, but never explicit, to very explicit romance novels, when I was 13, 14. So it's hard for me to, and I suspect the majority, at least speaking from a teenage girlhood, the majority of girls, at least when I grew up, were doing the same thing. So it's hard for me to even imagine that, Misha, the backlash, because I still have not started reading it. It's on my to-do list for this month. But I don't understand that at all, because the majority of teenagers are engaging in these activities. So I don't know why.
It's
Why
not
would people be shocked?
teenagers. It's not teenagers that are reading. It's actual adults
That
that
boggles my
don't
mind.
want they don't want the spicy scenes, so they stick with reading the young adult because they want the adventure and they want the romance, but they don't want the
Yeah,
details that are behind a bedroom door.
but that's not real. That's the thing. I mean, I guess I'm a different reader. I want the realism. Just tell me, because I know what's going on behind that closed door, and I want to see it. Don't hide
Right,
it from me. So I don't understand
right.
that. Yeah, like you, I'm baffled.
So,
It does.
Maggie,
It absolutely baffled me.
well, after we work on the baffling, and we'll just know there are individual differences. People like all sorts of different things for all sorts of different reasons. Maggie, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Can you handle it?
It's not that they like it or don't like it. It's the fact that they think one detailed scene denotes a five flame, five chili pepper, oh my God, this was too hot for me to read in public type of story.
Yeah,
That's what baffles. That's what
and
baffles.
again, I don't know the story, so I don't know if this was just to pull it off the shelf. There it is in the process. I don't know anything about that. So I'm gonna table that conversation. I'm gonna table that part of the conversation since I don't know anything about it. But Maggie, I am curious, when you take a look at the book that you've had eyes on, what is it about the book that's helped you in your writing?
I mean, I think the biggest part was including people's sexual history in their character space, because I had never even thought about that at all, in an explicit way. By explicit, I mean, like hair color, eye color, you know, those kinds of things, personality, family history. Like you think about all that stuff, but you don't really include the sexual history explicitly. So I think it was the notion that that was something that you should do. That was, I think, the biggest eye opener for me, in terms of taking the course. And then the second one was all the worksheets for removing your own personal self from when you're writing, because that was really hard for me to do. So having the guidance was really useful.
Well, you know, it's funny because the editor was even more adamant than you two talking about this. They want sheets for both. Have the author do this as the author first, then have the author do it for the character second. And and that is such a typical education therapy component that, and maybe I didn't go there directly because I wasn't thinking, I don't see this as a therapy book in that direction, but it's a tool. And anytime you use a tool and you're learning about something, how to write about it for this character or that character, you're actually doing the work inside yourself. So I might as well say that's what's happening here. Do this work to keep the person of the author out of it. And one of the things that's in the book is a Venn diagram that talks about characters' emotions, author emotions, and that it's the emotion of both of them where the author and the character connect, because we have all sorts of experiences in our lives where we have experienced the multitudes of emotions that can be done, and we can go back into that part of our lives and tap into the energy of that particular emotion and then help put that into the character. And it was a lot. I've got a sequence in there from the Brain on Story, the Sex on the Brain, and Play on the Brain. And we're talking about doing a play history where you go back to find the joyful as early back in your life as you can think of. When did I play where I felt really, 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 really great? The delight was off the charts. Because I think as adults, we forget that sexuality really is what the play is. Now, how can we incorporate this idea into the characters? And that's part of their history too, that we find out, what has been playful for them and how can they bring that playful component into the scene with sex and what it is that they're doing. Any thoughts on that, Maggie?
Well, I agree with you completely. I think it's gotten me to think about the natural curiosity around sex and sexuality, because as kids you're naturally we're naturally curious as a species, but children in particular because they're feeling the world around them. But as adults we forget that, and so part of the journey for me has been writing that natural curiosity into my character, but exploring, because of her sexual history, the layer of shame that comes with that. So it's taking the course has led me to a much more nuanced view of what she's experiencing in that realm of play as an adult.
Well, and I love how you framed it with we continue to be curious. I mean, that's something that, like play, can go across our lifetime. So if sometimes it's easier, Poppy, I'm going to address this for some comments that you made. Sometimes it's easier to write something that you know nothing about because you have the curious mindset. And it's like, if I do this, what will happen? If I do that, what will happen? And all of those components come together. So as the author, the freshness of what you're putting in for the character and having the character's responses in there, really be cool. And, a lot of people, when they first start out anything in the scenes with sex writing, they're more concerned about how am I moving bodies and where do bodies go and what do I call stuff? And, that to me is the smallest component of what you're dealing with because it's people connecting with people. It is an intimacy direction of the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, all of those things come together. And it's how you can use all of that to bring this richness, to make this tapestry in the story. So when I look at beginner writers, when I'm doing editing work, it's interesting to use that as a checklist and go, yep, they got physical, well, emotional. I don't know. Why are we having sex right now? What's going on? What's the meaning behind this? And I'm sure some of you have heard me say that I had this wonderful sexuality therapist supervisor who would talk about sex as a multi-purpose cleaner. And if you think about happy, have sex, guilty, have sex, shameful, have sex, angry, have sex, you list everything. Just by itself, the sex is not going to look the same because the driver of the train is a different emotion. And if we can tap into what the emotions have to do with, then it's going to be quite an exciting scene that puts together. But that means that you have to be able to, as an author, tap into what that emotion is so you can bring that forward and embody it in the physical nature of what's going on in the scene. Any of you speakers have any comments to that?
Dr. J, all I want to say is I don't think I've ever heard a person present a Zen beginner's mind with erotic romance, and I love you for it, and I think you are amazing because of it.
Oh my goodness, I'm a Zen person. Wow,
Zen
Poppy, that is
erotica.
so cool. That is so cool. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna put a hat on that says that. I'm wearing my Zen hat right now. Peach, you're back. You left, you came back.
Yeah, I couldn't hear anybody, so I had to go out and come back in again.
Did you hear I'm now Zen?
I did hear you're now Zen, but then again, I had an inkling that you were.
Did you have something else you wanted to share?
Well, I just wanted to touch back on the question that someone asked you about sort of bringing in new technology, or not technology, so terminology, and bringing in new words and things. And I had noticed a trend, I expect other people who read erotica have, that breed me is a really popular theme at the moment. And I was writing, I'd seen a sexy GIF and I'd used that as my prompt, and I was writing just like a quickie, and suddenly, I didn't know my character was going to say this, suddenly my character, the girl, said to the guy, breed me, and he found it incredibly sexy because generally he's a bit of a player, so generally he's trying to prevent girls from getting pregnant, and he found it very, very exciting when she said breed me. And I thought, isn't it interesting that this is an exciting dimension, whereas in my era, I'm in my 50s now, breed me was the last thing you wanted, except for when you decided it was time to have your family. And but the twist in the story, because I do like writing a twist in the story, was that afterwards she said, I must remember this place. This is where I may have conceived my baby, because she goes on holiday and sleeps with as many people as possible, and that's her sort of a load of faceless men, and one of them will be the baby daddy, but she doesn't know who. And then the guy is sort of thinking, oh my God, what does that mean for me? Because that's quite a weight on men, isn't it? And then suddenly it wasn't sexy anymore.
Yeah. And you're bringing up the point too about we create characters that, if we look at what the backstory is, if we look at what the sex history is, if we tie in the present time, the attitudes, the way that we experience sexuality, then we have flavors in the story that people would never expect to see unless we brought it forward in that way. And it's funny because I hadn't heard breed me. So this is an interesting thing. It immediately made me think of my friend J.C. Winchester, who writes pregnancy stories. That the whole thing is the person only wants to have sex with pregnant women, and it's all about the stomach and what that looks like and what that feels like, and that has a breeding quality to it. And but he's been writing that for a while, so I guess that's not new in the scheme of things. But yeah, that's really interesting to bring that forward. Wow, I just looked at the clock. We have been going for almost an hour. Man, I've been talking. Well, let me back up for a second. Again, I want to tell everybody that I am going to take the month of September off, and I haven't done this in a while, but it's something that I have historically done for myself. And I think that the pandemic, has kind of thrown everything in different directions. I have always been a go deep in the woods, reflect, gather new information. Outdoors does that for me. Stuart, I love it when you go out to the beach and stick your toes in the water and do your work out there. I mean, the nature is the thing that really replenishes, renourishes. And I think I'm at a place now. I mean, as you all know, this was never an intention that I was going to do. My students were the ones that said, you need to go write, have this other career. And I'm like, well, I hadn't really planned to have this other career. So I think I'm at a place where I want to do some evaluation, see directions about how I want to be doing things. I just found out that Social Audio Labs selected me out of, what did they say, 2,500 Twitter space people to take the recordings here to put them on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. So I was like, well, okay, I get this information right as I say, oh, I won't be doing anything for a month. I think I'll be able to put some past events up so people can hear what all we've been talking about. So in that direction, for what I think, if I'm anywhere near a internet site or anything like that, maybe I'll even pop in and see if I can have an impromptu space, and I'll do some scheduled tweets so you know that I'm still around and that sort of thing. But I do plan to take all of sexuality off, all of September sexuality off. I don't want to take sexuality off. And you
Take
can
the
always,
month.
yeah, I'm gonna
Take
take
the
the month.
month and relax.
And
Folks,
Nisha
when
will
she
be
says she's
here
going
for
out
you.
into the woods to reflect and relax and refresh, what she really means is she's going to be wandering around this mountain, probably ending up with some shirtless guy around and coming up with 5 billion stories as to why this shirtless guy is in the woods and I'm not there.
That's right. That's right. Because we all know that my imagination goes wild out in the woods, and I come up with unbelievable stories. And it's funny for those of you who don't know my history with travel and publication. Every single time that I have gone out of town is when I get sent a contract to sign, or I get sent the copy edits that have to be in 4 days. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to be this time no place at all where I'm going to be able to do this. So I was so excited that the contract came in this morning and it's already out and back to the publisher, because it's pretty crazy to think, how in the world is this going on like this? But I'm going to have each of you make a closing statement, all of you nice folks, Stuart, Alex, Poppy, and Peach, and Mish, and then we'll close out.
Well, Dr. J, I'll hop in and say, have a wonderful break. And also, I think all romance readers look to be in good hands when they select an author to spend time with. And I don't think there is anyone better than you.
Oh, Poppy, thank you. Thank you. That is so kind.
All I have to say is make sure you have your glasses, your phone, your shoes, and Mr. J has the credit card. And no falling
Absolutely.
down mountains.
I promise I won't fall down the mountain this time.
Okay.
Yeah, have a great time. Enjoy the recharge, and look forward to hearing you in October.
That sounds great, Stuart. Thanks.
All the best from me, and make sure you've got a good coffee machine there. I bet your cabin is kitted out with that. But I think you'll find a month to recharge, you'll be like chock-a-block with ideas. I had just 4 days away, and I was crowded in with new ideas.
Oh, yes. At least I'm going to take a notebook, a really thick one to write all those great ideas down in. Thanks, Peach. Alex.
Well, enjoy it, relax. Definitely take the coffees, you know it will like without your coffee, and just come up with lots of fantastic ideas because it will be brilliant. And get that audiobook done.
I will be on it for sure. And I really appreciate all of you and all of your wonderful comments and supporting me and the whole project here. Rocio, hello. And I told everybody that the Reimagine starts next week. And Misha put, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth dot to the left is the get your free ticket. So we're all excited about that. And I hope everybody has a great week. I'll be leaving right after Labor Day. So you'll see me around a little bit before I'm really, really gone. So y'all have a great rest of your day. I look forward to seeing everything on the timeline, and send Misha any questions you have about anything.
Oh, come on. I'm going to go take a nap.
You go take a nap, and I see that I have lots of comments that I haven't looked one time at since I've been here. I have 17 in the little blue bubble down there, and I even forgot to say, oh yeah, there's the blue bubble. But
I did
y'all
enough to like them.
Okay, so y'all take care, and I will see you when I get back.
Bye.
Bye.